Magandang araw po sa inyo lahat. Ako po si Christian Esguerra and welcome po sa ating episode ngayong araw dito po sa ating Facts First podcast. Alam niyo po, dito po sa ating podcast, marami po tayong mga pinag-uusapan. Usually may kinalaman po sa takbo ng politika, sa korupsyon, sa human rights, sa governance, etc. etc. Pero dun po sa mga talaga masugid na tagapakinig tsaka tagapanood po natin, alam po nila na isa po sa mga tinututukan nating issue dito ay yung Mindanao Peace Process. In particular, ito pong transition na nangyayari dito po sa Bangsamoro Autonomous Region in Muslim Mindanao. So para sa araw na to, pag-uusapan po natin specifically yung tinatawag na decommissioning ng mga MILF combatants. Alam niyo po, dahil nagkaroon po tayo ng landmark peace agreement between the Philippine government and the More Islamic Liberation Front in 2014. Tapos in 2019 ay nabuo po yung Bago Autonomous Region in Muslim Mindanao, yung tinatawag na BARM. Marami po yung dapat na gawin during this crucial transition. At alam po natin na yung kauna-unang eleksyon dyan sa rehiyon ay gaganapin po sa 2025. Pero isa po sa mga issues na dapat tutukan natin, yun yung decommissioning. Dun po sa mga nakapanood noong Senate hearing noong early February, naalala niyo po ba na nagkasagutan sina Peace Advisor Galvez at saka po si Carlito Galvez at saka po si Senator Raffy Tulfo dahil nagkaroon po ng aligasyon si Senator Tulfo na meron daw korupsyon doon sa decommissioning process. Dahil alam niyo po, di ba, yung sa pagsuko o pag-surrender ng armas ng mga combatants ng MILF dahil sila na nga po yung namumuno temporarily doon sa regional government, pero pong kapalit yun economic benefits, kasama po ron cash. So isa po sa mga tanong ni Senator Tulfo, bakit daw according to the figures by Secretary Galvez as of August last year, 26,132 yung non-decommission ng mga combatants. Pero ang armas daw na naisauli pa lang o na-surrender na 4,625. Okay? So pag-usapan natin yan na mas malalim. Meron po tayong dalawang panauhin ngayon na inimbitahan natin. I'd like to welcome first our program si Professor Pancho Lara. Isa po siyang babad na eksperto pagdating po dyan sa Mindanao Peace Process. Siya po yung Executive Director in Climate and Conflict Action Asia. Dati rin po siyang Senior Policy Advisor ng International Alert Philippines. Magandang araw po sa inyo, Professor Pancho.
Magandang hapon sa iyo, Christian, at sa mga nakikinig.
Okay. Tapos kasama rin po natin ang isang veteranong legislator, abogado, book author, lagyan na natin pati historian. At siya rin po ay ang dating senior member ng MILF Peace Panel. I'd like to welcome again to our podcast si Datu Attorney Mike Mastura. Magandang gabi, sir, and thank you for joining. Magandang araw po and thank you for joining us sa Facts First po.
Magandang araw din po sa inyo, Christian, at si Pancho.
Hello, Datu.
I'm happy to be with you again, Christian.
Okay. Simulan po natin ilatag po natin ng simple para maintindihan din po ng mga hindi lang mga taga-Bangsamoro yung pinag-uusapan nating issue. So una ko munang tatanungin si Professor Pancho. Unang-una, ano po ba ibig sabihin ng decommissioning na ito at bakit kasama po ito dito sa peace process between the Philippine government and the More Islamic Liberation Front, yung decommissioning?
So kung tutusin natin, yung kasunduan dito sa peace agreement na ito, meron tinatawag na aspeto ng normalization, yung pagbabalik sa normal ng kabuhayan ng mga tao sa Mindanao, lalong-lalo na sa mga lugar kung saan maraming tunggalian at karahasan. Kaya ang ibig sabihin ng normalize, sa mga naging aspeto nun, ay alisin natin yung digmaan, alisin natin yung karahasan. At isang malaking aspeto ron ay paggamit ng mga baril. Okay? Pero, pag tinignan natin, siya ay hindi tumalima, itong kasunduan ito, doon sa classic na DDR framework na disarmament, demobilization, reintegration, kasi sa simula't sa whole, ang naging kasunduan dito, hindi susundin yung modelo na yon, lalo na when it comes to disarmament. Ang napakahalaga rito ay yung pag-decommission, hindi ng baril, pero yung combatant. So yung term na decommissioning actually refers to making the combatant become someone else, hindi na siya guerrilla, hindi siya may hawak na baril, kung hindi siya ay produktibong nilalang o citizen ng ating bayan ng Bangsamoro. Ganon. Yung baril, pumasok lamang bilang component ng pag-decommission ng isang combatant, yung pagbibigay niya ng kanyang baril. Okay, so una gusto ko iliwanag yun, kasi I remember writing the first draft asked by government at that time to come up with what would be something that would be a normalization and the weapons component. And I did that, and I remember at that time, ang head pa ng panel ay si now Supreme Court Justice Leonen, no? And I gave him that, and I suggested so many options based on the literature. But the important thing was the decommissioning of the commandant, which means that, kasama po doon yung demobilization. Ibig sabihin, yung pagkawala na ng command structure ng military na MILF, napapalitan yun ng political structure. Yan na, yung UBJP, political parties, etc. So yun po yung dahilan doon. Mahalaga sa isang kasunduan, pangkapayapaan, yung pagtalakay ng ano ang magiging kinabukasan ng combatant at kailangan gawin lahat para mapahusay ang kanyang bagong buhay at hindi siya ilagay sa panganib. Kaya hindi pwedeng automatic na basta lang na i-disarm ang isang combatant para bumalik siya sa kanyang baryo na lahat ng kapitbahay niya armado at siya wala nang baril. So yun yung masyadong mahaba ako.
Okay yun. Hindi, marami tayong dapat ilatag dito sa issue na ito, no? Sige, punta naman po ako kay Attorney Mike Mastura. Tumbukin na natin yun, no? Hindi lang naman si Senator Tulfo yung unang nag-bring up ng issue na yan, although napaka-high profile ng confrontation na ginawa niya kay Secretary Carlito Galvez. Sinabi niya may corruption doon dahil kung titingnan doon yung figures, 26,132 hinadecommission ng mga combatants, pero yung mga na-surrender daw ng mga firearms, nasa 4,625 lang. Tapos sabi niya, bakit binigyan ng ano yan? 100,000 pesos each cash, 'di ba? Yun yung kasama sa agreement. Kung merong ganyang kalaking discrepancy, ano po ba yung tamang pagtingin diyan? Mukha ba may corruption kung ganyan kung ang pagbubatayan po yung discrepancy?
In the first place, correlation yan. Equation ay 26 persons, individuals, as against 4,600 firearms. So talaga namang malayo kung yun ang benchmark natin. Now, doon sa pera, kasi hindi malinaw sa combatants yung umpisa. They misunderstood, if they misunderstood, kung gano'n ang pagsabi. Kasi ang original, even ako, narinig ko yung 1 million. Nagtaka ako, saan natin kukunin yung budget na ganyan? Okay, so sa madaling salita, very clear na mayroon smoke, gun smoke. Paano mo i-reconcile yan? Now, the second point about the individuals, wala namang ipapakita na listahan. Yun din ang dinidiin nung House Committee. Dahil ito sa Senate Committee, ngayon palang naliwanagan yan. Pero dati sa House, sinabi na dapat meron listahan. Sabi ni Secretary Galvez, ang listahan ay doon sa independent
decommissioning body.
The last Senate hearing, makita natin na umappear or dumalo yung head ng body na yon, decommissioning body. Independent ito. So in the process, nasabi nila confidential. Siguro hindi maganda yung word confidential dahil Ang importante dito, identity. Sino ba talaga ang nag-decommission? Hindi natin gusto marinig yung word surrender. Ang gusto natin marinig, siya ay bumalik na sa kalooban ng magandang loob na pagbalik sa mainstream society natin. Because yun ang tinatawag na normal. Hindi normal yung pagka-rebelde. Hindi normal yung pagka maging guerrilla at saka lalabanin mo yung authority. Normal yan kung nandiyan pa yung armed struggle. Kasi meron din identity, yun ang ginamit ko when I was the lawyer and senior member of the panel, na meron status ang MILF. Diyan yan makita, kasi dapat lahat may base, in law as well as practice and convention. So doon sa Convention on War, meaning to say the Geneva Convention applies 3 categories. So therefore, MILF falls under the category of non-state, pero siya ay non-state na armed. Yun ang pagkaiba kasi mayroon ibang non-state pero they are not engaged in armed struggle. Ganun din yung NDF. If you compare us, yung CCP, they invoke that in the negotiation na sila ay may status. Importante itong makita ng taong bayan, Christian, dahil change of personality, change of identity is important here. Kaya decommissioning means turn over your firearm if you have firearm. Maaari mong i-retain yung personal firearm mo, pero susunod ka sa batas na magkaroon ka ng lisensya. Tulad yung mga politicians na tinutukoy na warlords, pero marunong sila mag-registro ng kanilang mga firearms. So ito, hindi sila dapat masanay na dala-dala kahit saan yung armas na yan. Last point. In that change of identity, pagkaiba ng identity, hindi na tila sila rebelde. Halimbawa, pwede bang chief minister ka, rebelde? Pwede bang senior minister ka or OIC governor na ikaw din ay commander of the BIAF, the Bangsamoro Armed Forces? Hindi ata pwede yun. Very inconsistent. Dahil first, again, enumeration, you swore into the Constitution to uphold the Constitution. Ang malaking puwang diyan, this is my additional point, something went wrong with the proseso ng hindi ito pardon kung hindi Pancho, meron proclamation ng at saka meron ng commission, no, na masunod natin, no,
Yes.
sa proclamation. What am I referring to?
Okay.
Amnesty.
Amnesty.
I'm not referring to the Amnesty International. I'm referring to the process of amnesty, meaning to say, mawala sa record yung kanilang pag-rebelde o paglaban o anuman krimen tungkol doon. Of course, iba yung rape or common crimes, no? Dapat tungkol sa pagrebelde, tungkol sa rebellion.
Okay, maganda, no? Napakalinaw po ng pagkakalatag ng issues ng ating dalawang panauhin. Punta po tayo rin sa napaka-importanting punto po. Gaano ba ka-credible, legitimate o convincing itong decommissioning so far? Alam natin merong independent decommissioning body binubuo ng Turkey, Norway, Brunei, MILF, tsaka Government of the Philippines. Pero dun po, balik tayo kay Professor Pancho. Sa monitoring nyo, legit ba itong pag-surrender ng mga armas, yung pag-decommission ng ilang mga combatants, and paano ba na-double check yan kung totoong mga MILF combatants yan at totoong baril nila yan at hindi naman, baka naman pangalawa, pangatlong baril yung sinusurrender nila, yung pinakabulok. Tsaka pangatlo, 60 ko na. Meron malistahan talaga yan. 40,000, di ba, yung nasa figures nila dapat i-decommission. Paano ba na-double check kung talagang MILF yan? Yun po.
Well, simulan ko to sa huli mong puntos. Yung mismong 40,000 na yun, lumabas na sa Senate hearing na nakabatay lang yung sa isang sulat na ipinadala ni Chair Murad sa government indicating na ito yung bilang namin. Okay. Wala akong alam ng proseso ng pagkumpirma niyang 40,000 na yan. Okay. Ilang beses nang hiningi yung listahan ng 40,000 na yan, pero wala bang lumalabas na talagang listahan. Yung sinasabi ni William Hoveland, yung Norwegian na nandun sa Senado, na meron silang listahan, yun yung listahan ng mga taong nakatanggap lang. Hindi yung buong 40,000. Iliwanag natin yun. Pangalawa, maraming itinanong, babalikan ko yun, yung mga tinanong hinggil sa quality ng mga firearms. Marami rin problema doon kasi karamihan doon unserviceable na. Bagamat sinasabi nila, serviceable pa. Papaliwanag ko later yon. In short, dahil lang sa hindi maliwanag yung 40,000, hindi rin maliwanag kung saan nanggaling yung from the 40,000, 12,000 ang decommission at doon sa 12,000 yung kalahati lang actually ang pananagutan ng MILF. Kasi yun lang raw ang pag-aari nila. Kalahati noon ay pag-aari raw ng mga combatant at wala silang, hindi nila madidecommission yun sa bawat combatant yun. Because of all of these agreements.
Sir, sorry lang for cutting off.
Yeah.
Yung punto na yun, hindi ba splitting hairs yun?
Yes, correct. It is actually the biggest problem. In fact, Christian, what I am amazed is that the government knew that this was a problem from long ago. Ang dami na nagtanong nito, challenge na sila ng Kongreso, ilabas yung pangalan Imbis na sabihin nilang ganito talaga, wala pa yung pangalan, may proseso dyan, malalaman natin over time. Ang ginawa, in-stonewall, hindi nilabas. Pangalawa, ang tagal nang tinatanong sa kanila, bakit nga ganyan lang ang bilang ng baril in contrast to the number of supposed combatants. Imbis na maliwanag nila, ito yung mga problema. Ang ginagawa, stonewall ulit, hindi namin malilista. In fact, yung pinakamalaking lumabas nga nung hearing ang binigay na dahilan raw sa may mga sundalong pupunta sa labanan na walang baril, naghihintay na may tumumba, tapos kukunin niya yung baril. Have you heard a more ridiculous explanation for the lack of, yung walang consistency sa bilang ng members and bilang ng firearms? In short, it is really incredible. It is not credible at all. It is actually a big problem. And what appalls me is that they did not even prepare an explanation long before they went to the Senate. Parang napaka-confident Kaya ang nangyari, ayun, sunod-sunod. Tama yun lahat. Actually, the irony of it, Christian, is tama yun lahat ng mga questions ni Senator Tulfo at yung questions ni Senator Amy. Bagamat hindi nila alam ang context, I'll give you another point doon sa decommissioning ng mga barel na sinasabi. Di ba sinabi nila doon sa Senate hearing, lahat raw ay serviceable, wala sa kanilang sira? But they gave a different definition to what is serviceable With the definition nila, there will be no unserviceable firearms. Tinignan mo, we have pictures of the firearms. Nakita mo talaga, walang stock, walang barrel, wala nang firing pin. Di ba hindi na serviceable? Pero ang kanilang definition, as long as pwede namang gawin yan, serviceable pa rin yan. Number two, yun nga, yung quality of the firearms. Even if you ask the IDB members, I was in one of those sessions where they, so-called, released the firearms. And everyone was, laughing behind their backs Kasi alam naman nila, yung mga baril na mga World War II, Garand, may shotgun pa. Ganon. So ganun yung quality. So from the quality of the firearms, the number of combatants, what government is accountable for, talagang it's a it is not consistent at all. Does not make any sense. Finally, there was no plan actually to deal with the guns that are in the possession of members. In the Senate hearing, suddenly they came out with SALW, small arms and light weapons. But the small arms and light weapons program is supposed to deal for the wider number of firearms that are not registered in Mindanao. It is not specifically geared for the combatants who own personal firearms. And sabi nga ni Datu Mike, they've already changed their identity. Under the law, if you are still in possession of firearms right now, na walang rehistro, you are committing a crime. And then lastly, the stenciling process that they were talking about is really a useless process. You ask anyone in the firearms business, ang kailangan mo is the process that everyone undertakes under Republic Act 10591, which means yung mismong barrel ng barrel, yung forensic idadaan yan, so that if it is used in any manner in the future, the police will be able to trace the owner of the firearm. Simply for that stenciling program does not rise to the level of 10591. In short, bakit hindi na lang in-implement kasi yung 10591? Dito
Pancho,
Go ahead, Dato.
Christian, may kunting caution lang dyan. Kasi it was agreed that this will be done in phases. So,
Yes, so
3 phases.
Yes,
So this is the last phase.
yes.
But if you consider the 40,000, again, correlation. Lawyers are always
Yes.
correlating because law requires you to be broad in your perspective. And so if we correlate the 40,000, ano mga benchmark dyan? Sa first phase, nananatili na parang yung figure na binigay na 27 plus, nandiyan na yan, hindi umuurong. So ngayon, third phase na tayo. So by now, there should be new figures. In fact, the promise of Secretary Galvez to the Senate when Senator Amy Marcos said you have to submit, or the chairman himself, si Senator Tulfo, na we want to see you submit certain figures. Then sa second hearing, I did not see it. I think walang pagbabago nung figures or any documents except people who came to attend the hearing. Now, let's do it this way. I want to say that is the MILF playing for keeps? That's an English expression, no? Are they playing for keeps? So, is that the correct perspective for giving more money? I think tama yung sinabi ni Chairman of the Senate sa committee na yan, na hindi dapat tingnan na ma-increase yung budget, dapat tingnan deceleration. In other words, hindi na dapat increase budget kundi decrease budget kasi we are going normal. Now here I will make a general statement. I think we should change the way we think about decommissioning or bigger picture. Let's look at the bigger picture. We should change the way we look at the peace process. Back to basic, the 2 tracks are political tracks and the normalization track. Decommissioning is only an implementing mechanism to the second one, to the normalization. So, ang perspective diyan, hindi paramihan ng baril, no matter how many baril ang i-turned in, magiging pera, buying firearms from the MILF. Kaya nga, it's a cycle. Baka, pagtanggap na naman ng pera, ibibili na naman ng bagong armas. That is the cycle that I see. So if we change the way we look at the peace process, we should talk more about normalization. What is normal? Is it normal to bear firearms? We do not have a constitutional provision like the U.S. Constitution, where it states that citizens have the right to bear arms. In fact, in the 1971 Constitutional Convention, I was proposing that kind of formula. But having said that, maybe if we look at the timetable, time is running out. And I do not see that the OPAPRO also is closing shop. Unless what they have in mind is to go and jump to the NDF peace process. There is no NDF peace process. So you see, it's a function of the budget. So the budgetary allocation must be looked at because there are also overlapping. I work out in the beginning the third support fund for third-party negotiation. And to this day, we are looking at the CFSI and the World Bank in the beginning at the different camps. This is corollary to the individual or normalization by way of coming to the fold of the mainstream society, not just the law, but the mainstream society. So are we rationalizing or are we stabilizing the transformation of the camps into real communities? That would be, again, a measure. Here we have to look for measures, no longer the benchmark, but how do we measure the success of the normalization process vis-a-vis the other downstream project like Subatra. There is also the European Union support for, in the case of the CFSI and others, the transformation of the camp. In the case of the European Union funds, they are looking at NGO communities, how they are building capabilities as part of the normalization. So all of this, if we look at them all in all, we are veering away from counting of firearms, from listing of surrenderies. We are really looking at governance. We are not looking at the unusual situation. But the MILF's position is always masira ang peace process. Every time you do something that is not in accordance with their doing or that suits their position, they say masira ang peace process. Wala na po yung siraan ng peace process because they are handling the government of the Bangsamoro. What they should do is inclusivity. Inclusivity means hindi dapat lang ang Bangsamoro structure, whatever is there in that political structure, is para sa lahat, hindi para lang sa members ng MILF, card-bearing or non-card-bearing.
Okay, ang ganda ng mga binabanggit ng ating dalawang panauhin. Yung susunod na tanong ko, unang pasasagutin po natin si Professor Pancho. Pero Attorney Dato, sagutin nyo rin po, no? Medyo prangkahin ko na yung usapan. Total, napaka-prangka naman po ng discussion natin dito, no? Kung yan po yung mga realidad na nakikita natin so far dito sa normalization process, in particular dito sa decommissioning process, hindi po ba parang naglolokohan lang tayo dito? For instance, kung isinosurrender ay mga bulok na baril, tapos in return, nakakatanggap ng ng economic benefits yung dating combatants. Tapos, nandun yung possibility, baka naman rin pambili ng baril uli. Tapos, at the same time, sila yung namamahala dito sa regional government. Hindi ba parang naglolokohan tayo dito? You get to enjoy your cake and eat it too, for lack of a better tawag dito, idiomatic expression. Kayo muna, Professor Pancho, what do you think?
Gusto ko lang muna sabihin, tama yung sinabi ni Tato Mike, no? It's a big question eh. Are they playing for keeps dito sa arrangement na ito? Mukhang ang terms nila nun na gusto nila ay yung terms na tinulak nila, yun ang mamayani. Pero ang problem dyan is whether or not it will lead to the stability we want. Secondly, there is data already, Tato Mike. There are several news articles that we already used about last year, about interviews with so-called decommissioned combatants who reported in interviews that they had actually bought new firearms with the monies that they received in 100,000. No, so that is already a fact. It's happening on the ground. Yung question about naglolokohan ba, I'd really like to throw that question actually, Christian, to the people from government who are the main peace partners, and talking about OPAB in the Secretary Galvez, and then of course the presidential assistant for Mindanao, no, si Mr. What's his name? The presidential assistant for Mindanao is the husband of Don Sulueta. Anyway,
Lagdameo.
Secretary Lagdameo, no? Kasi
Right.
basically, in the entire negotiations right now, when each one is being asked to be accountable for what is happening, they seem to be accepting, no, the terms being pointed out by the MI. So there is no, they're very lenient in terms of, in fact, that's the reason why they got into trouble in the Senate. I think the senators were looking for people who would say, yeah, well, there is a problem here. We need to make sure that the weapons are properly secured and that we collect as many weapons as we can from the avowed number of combatants that they claim to have. Okay. But you're right, Christian. What is really the truth is we don't think they have 40,000 combatants. We think they have combatants with relatives, and their relatives have been included in the list. Okay. Now, that is not the first time. This is not the first time that happened. We know that that was also a fact in the case of the previous peace agreement with Noor Miswari with the MNLF. No? Kasi I remember the study that Mike done by E.A. Coronel, no, about that process, and she documented the same, no, in that particular process. And then I can understand why they would not want to release the names of their members as a rebel force, because the NPA does the same. In the negotiations I was involved in, one of the conditions of JOMA was we cannot give you the names of our combatants until all of this is over, or else their lives will be. So I can understand that, no, but there has to be some credible guarantee that the 40,000 or whatever number of weapons they profess to have will be decommissioned, because they're the ones who put forward that number. Okay, and yes, we are in the last phase. But what is happening is in the last phase, the number of weapons are not equivalent to the number of combatants supposed to be decommissioned. So we either have to accept the fact that it won't happen anymore, and that was why I was suggesting probably, as Tato Mike said, decommissioning is probably, as it is has been undertaken, it's not the way to go. So our position was, from a long time ago, was, why did we ever even include a decommissioning component? When actually everyone, every Filipino, is supposed to have the right to own weapons up to 50 under the new law, in fact, up to even 15 weapons. And now Filipino citizens can have even the right to carry weapons outside their homes, and yet say that the MILF combatant who is decommissioned will have to surrender all his weapons. So we have to accept the fact that Mindanao will continue to have weapons. What we want is that those weapons are properly registered, they're, that they can be traced if they're used for nefarious purposes. And if that is the case, then we can say that, okay, fine, that is what, as Datu Micah said, let's look at the other positive things in this peace process that people seem to be neglecting, the input of socioeconomic benefits into different communities, or what's this, rights, new laws that are created on land, etc., rather than just focus. Kaya lang, let's always remember that this was part of the agreement they signed. This was part of the social contract they made. And that is why a lot of Filipinos are angry, is because they thought that this would happen. This was a promise made to the Filipino people, and the rest, that part of this would be a decommissioning of weapons. But that is the ugly truth, no?
Mm.
That is the ugly truth. Ngayon kami, we don't expect this process to really result in what it claims to deliver. So we're being more and more trying to be more and more realistic about it. What can we do? So yung marami nagsasabi, ganito na lang, 1591. Oh, parehistro ninyo lahat ng baril ninyo. Ganon. Even
So
that.
Grabe.
anyway,
Kayo,
when you
Attorney Dato, ano pong napaka-grim nung ano natin ng mga realidad na nakikita natin Sige, Dato.
okay, well, the word pulling each other was already used in the Senate. So hindi na po yan vulgar. The word, there is corruption here. Except that, are you corrupt? Well, that is not the question. There was no accusation. But certainly, if you look at the figures, you will not be convinced. You will not believe it. So, what is the next thing to do? To be prospective. Again, time is running out because we are preparing for election 2025. MILF, through the UBJP, its political arm, and again, that is the first track, is preparing for election. So, let us ask, is this successful? I am convinced that, when we talk election, how many will really participate? Again, we go back to a scenario. We should go into scenario making. The scenario would be that they would again put up proxies if they cannot field candidates. Unless they learn to do alliance, then it will still be inclusive MILF membership for the party. I went to the Supreme Court because, this goes into legalities, but the bottom line is the validity of what they have passed through legal means. And I'm talking about lawmaking at the BTA, the Bangsamoro Transition Authority, is a lawmaking body. I am afraid that even in the course of debates, there is very little. Practically, the one-man majoritarian rule, in the sense that it is majority of 1, 40 plus 1, has prevailed in all this code that we are talking about. Eventually, it will come to a point, the latest is the governors questioning the local governance code. So eventually, it will gather in the Supreme Court as a bulk of laws that are questioned within constitutional infirmity. Now, is this again part of the playing for keeps? Meaning to say, another extension is Christian. We had a one-to-one interview on this agenda of extension. We had another interview with my tukayo Michael Yusinko on this idea of postponement again. Can you have put a rider to this scenario that I am describing? Yes, the latest is the constitutional amendments that are being proposed. There was a basis during the BTA, the Bangsamoro Transition Commission, for proposed amendments in case the CAB, the Comprehensive Agrarian, Comprehensive Agreement, of Bangsamoro Agreement, and then the finally the BOL or Bangsamoro Organic Law. It should bear us in mind that these are the legitimate agenda of the MILF as a governing body for the Bangsamoro Parliament. But you see, they are not even transformed into a parliament in the course of this 3 + 3, 6 years. And I am happy to say that the President Bongbong Marcos, made it clear that there will be no more postponement, that we should prepare for the next election. And I think that is what is taking place now. Maybe you can ask follow-up question.
Okay. Sige. Yung susunod na tanong po, no, siguro before we wrap this up, no, pag-usapan natin, very telling yung mga binabanggit niyo po, no, the two gentlemen that we're speaking with today. Meron pa bang paraan para masalvage itong troubled decommissioning process? Or is it time to somehow follow the route yung binanggit nyo, Professor Pancho, na parang tanggapin na lang yung realidad na mukhang hindi natin maaabot o maaatim yung what was envisioned in this specific peace agreement with the MILF? What do you think?
Well, I think first, there are still steps to be taken. I would like to see government take those steps that have been indicated during the hearings, and a lot of people have been asking them to do. Number one, there's still a need to come up with an actual, accurate listing of combatants. Number two, that the weapons that are actually decommissioned are actually weapons. Number three, that there are protection guarantees that the funds that are given are not used to procure new weapons. Number four, there has to be a will to control these weapons in the lead up to the 2025 elections. That's the real connection. That is what worries us day and night. You will notice that during the barangay elections recently and the plebiscite, the Bangsamoro registered the bloodiest election on record. We made that a point, and that was because of the extent of the use of weapons across the region. And then we were criticized by COMELEC, only for the Philippine National Police 2 weeks later to declare that indeed we were right. It was the bloodiest election, and we think that 2025 may be more dangerous than the precisely because of the issue of weapons proliferation and the failure, I will say it now, of the decommissioning process as earlier envisioned. I do not see why we are beating around the bush, and that, from the independent decommissioning body who probably were put on the spot, because I know that their function does not include the actual provision of the fund. They do not do that, but they were made to be the ones who actually did that. The commissioning body is there to just receive the weapons, to witness the process. And so there are a lot of things that need to be done, and someone has to demand accountability. So in that way, therefore, the work being done by the senators is in the right direction. But what I'm saying, Christian, is eventually we come to a point where we will secure what can be secured during the decommissioning process. What happens later? I am not prepared to ditch the cap, the entire peace agreement on the issue of decommissioning. You know? Because I think much more is at stake in terms of this peace agreement. But that is central to getting people support. If we do not do this right, no, if we do not have closure proper to this decommissioning project, I fear that there will be no support in the future for this peace process. And I remember being with Mike, in the Dato Mike in one of these meetings about a year ago. You remember this conversation for peace, Mike, no? And I was, a bit struck by the fact that in that meeting, none of the people who were there were expecting that the MILF would hold on to power in 2025. And that is scary again because, all the political parties and the other candidates for the elections will be vying with and competing with a political organization that remains armed to the teeth despite being in power already in the bar.
Okay. Kayo naman po, Dato, what do you think? Pwede pa ba maisalba ito? And how serious a concern is the decommissioning issues that we're seeing now dito sa kabuuan ng peace process?
I already said that the decommissioning is just a mechanism. The main agenda is the political project of setting up a parliamentary system, a regular parliament where the members will be accountable to the people. As it is now, all of them were appointed and they do not seem to realize that they are accountable for the actions, for the acts that they are passing in the BTA, the Transition Authority. They would still be liable for anything, including liability for funds, especially for funds that have been allocated to them. I want to say this by way of question. What if they become convinced, Christian, that they will lose in the 2025 election? Will they make pretext for the failures? You see, there is the catch. They may be still thinking, let us extend, because you see, all the laws that they pass are, again, I repeat, why do you find them in the Supreme Court now? And therefore, we must weigh in the Supreme Court decision on top of the decommissioning process. In other words, to me now, the decommissioning process is not at all important, because if they are no longer in power, the status will be changed. The status quo will be that there will be other people who will be more responsible to those who elected them. The constituency building and making will take over this, ayuda for exclusive members of the UBJP. Now, what happens if they make a pretext? And what would that be pretext? Will they go back to the hills with the firearms that they are not decommissioning. Those are tests of the success or failure of the bigger picture, the peace process itself, and not the decommissioning. Because the decommissioning has fallen into the hands of retired military generals who have made it their career in their retirement of pro, and they do not seem to retire even in that position in the OPA Pro. There should, I repeat, as in the previous, one head has already rolled. There should roll. There should be a head that should roll because the decommissioning has failed.
Grabe. Ano to trademark ni Datu Mike tong ano. Natawa kayo, Professor Pancho. You agree completely?
I agree completely. Dato Mike has been a mentor, for a lot of us scholars.
Well, it was a very interesting discussion po, no? Medyo napa-English na naman tayo, bandang dulo. Pero at least malinaw po yung mga issues na pinag-usapan natin, no? Yan ang challenge ko lang pag in-interview ko si Atty. Mike, eh. Talagang very comfortable siya explaining in English. Pero again, maraming salamat po sa inyong dalawa po. Kay Professor Pancho Lara, tsaka kay Dato Atty. Mike Mastura for joining us dito. Hindi mo po ito yung huling pag-uusap natin dito sa podcast regarding this very important issue. Marami po tayong hihimayin kaugnay po dito sa Bangsamoro transition at saka dito po sa ongoing peace process sa Mindanao. In the meantime, maraming salamat po sa inyong dalawa.
Thank you.
Salamat din po.
Thank you, Mike.
Ayan. Salamat po, salamat. Ayan. Yan po, mga nakausap natin sa ating episode ngayong araw, sina Professor Pancho Lara at saka si Datu Attorney Michael Mastura. Alam niyo po, kung nasusundan niyo po yung issue dyan sa Bangsamoro, no? Talagang lagi pinapaliwanag ko po ito, no? Huwag niyo po isipin na yung pinag-uusapan po sa Bangsamoro only concerns the people of the Bangsamoro at wala tayong pakialam dito sa Maynila or yung mga nandun po sa labas ng Muslim Mindanao. Napaka-importante po na maging napakamatagumpay, na maging successful po yung Bangsamoro peace process. Pero ang tanong, the devil is in the details. Kaya nga po pinag-usapan natin specifically ngayong araw na ito, hindi commissioning. Kasama po rin pag-surrender ng mga firearms. Kasi kung naglolokohan po tayo dito, marami po implications yan. Kung hindi po nasusunod yung proseso na dapat sinusunod, kaugnay po doon sa peace agreement sa pagitan po ng gobyerno ng Pilipinas at saka po ng Moro Islamic Liberation Front. Well, in the meantime, maraming salamat po for joining us today in our special episode dito po sa ating Facts First podcast. Ako po si Esguerra. Maraming salamat po.